and welcome back to the first episode of SuperCoach Edge for 2025. Of course, for those of you tuning in for the first time, welcome. And for our returning regulars, or the you people, as Liam likes to affectionately refer to our community as, welcome back. It is always a pleasure to have your company.
What do you mean, you people?
What do you mean, you people?
Well, you'll notice that Liam isn't here as yet, but he has touched down back from hopping around Europe on his honeymoon, which no doubt he absolutely loved, and what a preseason to have off the back of that. But he will be joining us for the next episode. And part of the reason why we have, I guess, jumped into this episode first and foremost is because we have a whole host of analysis episodes to come out over the coming weeks leading into the official practice matches. So we thought, let's just jump on the horse, get back on it, dust off this old hat, which as you can see is pretty dusty if you're tuning into the YouTube side of things here, you can see that. But we are keen to be back. We've hit the ground running. We've run our hours over every single line. So bit of a segue here, because over the course of the preseason, we'll be rolling out various analysis episodes, going line by line, breaking it down to Premos, value picks / mid prices, and rookies. We'll be looking at which of the Premos present the most value, who presents the most upside, which mid prices could be on the cusp of a breakout year, and when it comes to rookies, which are those that we're keeping an eye on very, very closely before we see any exposed form in the preseason. Of course, there's an official practice match or preseason game, and there is an unofficial practice / preseason match as well. And we will, of course, be analyzing those in great detail as well. And because we're not psychopaths here, or at least we're not complete psychopaths, we're going to be kicking things off in, I guess, normal order when it comes to line by line. And we'll kick that off with forward Premos for this episode. And before I guess we delve into our analysis, let's have a quick look at how the scoring differed across 2023 to 2024 based on the quality of players available as SuperCoach forwards. Now, it's something that we spoke about this time last year, and Liam went into great detail about this as well, so I'll be keen to catch up with him in the next episode and sort of rehash back over this again. But in 2023, as we know, we were blessed with the likes of Butters, Goulden, Rosie, Taranto, Dunkley, Cogs, Sheasel, and Jackson. So it's fair to say, we were brimming with quite a few options there, and it was hard really to fit them all in. And to be a top 8 forward in 2023, you needed to have an average of 97.9 or above. Let's compare this to 2024, and it's probably no surprise here. If you were playing a SuperCoach last season, it was quite dire. So 2024, a majority of those players that I just spoke about lost forward DPP eligibility, and thus we had to rely on the likes of Heaney. Yeah, it wasn't bad. He was pretty good. HORNE-FRANCIS, well, he ended up being the second top scorer behind Heaney up forward. We had Moore as well from the Hawks, Rankine and Jackson as the top liners. But the quality fell away from there, as we know, and was evident with the traditional forwards in Hogan, Brent Daniels, Mackay, Cameron, rounding out the top 8 scorers. So it was very, very thin, very, very thin. Now, as I mentioned, Liam went into detail in this episode, the equivalent episode this time last year, where he guesstimated that the cutoff average of the 8th best scorer would be mid-90s. And as it turned out, in 2024, it was much less than that with 86.5. So it was slim pickings, that's for sure. But this time around, in 2025, thankfully, we are blessed with some standout Premos in the form of HORNE-FRANCIS, Dylan Moore, and IZAK Rankine at least, along with some former fallen Premos and a complete bevy, I will say, of value options. So thankfully, it isn't slim pickings this time around. So with that being said, let's get into things and kick things off with the what it turns out to be the second top scorer for the forwards in 2024. But with Heaney having lost his forward eligibility, that means that HORNE-FRANCIS, who I'm about to speak about, is the top scorer of the forwards. So he's priced at 537K as a mid forward. 2024 average was a 99.7, quite healthy. Doesn't have the extra buy, thankfully, given that we speak about the extra buy in respect of those teams that play in round 0 or the opening round, and it means that they have an early buy across the early rounds. But thankfully, HORNE-FRANCIS doesn't have that to contend with. And with HORNE-FRANCIS, he took a big, big step up in his game in his second season in teal, lifting his average from 77.3 to 99.7. Most promisingly, we saw his ceiling scores double, with 9 100-plus scores and 4 120-plus scores compared to 4 and 2 in respective categories the previous season. As the highest averaging forward for 2024, we'll say that without Heaney, HORNE-FRANCIS had a very impressive rate of scoring with 1 point per minute average, sitting in front of Jackson with 0.93 and RANKINE with 0.92. And this is testament to his scoring ability and making the most of his opportunities whilst on field. Of the top 25 players, he also ranks as the second best player in terms of high floor, with only 9 scores below 90 from 24 games, which includes finals, with RANKINE having just 6 from 15 games, which is better, obviously. But in terms of stacking it up alongside games played, on average, HORNE-FRANCIS had only 37.5% games below 90, which ranks him number 1. So really good to see, and it's those players that you really want in your team. High floor, high ceiling players. If you can get a player that ticks both boxes, 100%, that's a lock and load. If you have a player that can at least tick a high floor, that's going to help you, especially when it comes to your league matches, your cash leagues, in having a consistent scorer from week to week. Interestingly, his CBAs on average were lower in 2024 compared to 2023, which was 54% compared to 58%. So it does beg the question as to how he increased his scoring overall. And the first is in terms of hitting the scoreboard with 27-21 up from 16-12 the previous season. And this makes up 15.3 points per game of his score on a weekly average, which ranks him 5th behind Warner, Bont, Petrarca and Heaney for midfielders who generate the most SuperCoach points via these means. So, he's obviously a midfielder come forward, but the fact that we're able to select him as a forward is just complete juice to us, because as we saw previous seasons, Rosie, Heaney, these guys who can play a bit of mid-time, it just elevates their scoring ceiling and with it their floor as well. So it's really no surprise here running through these numbers that he ticks those boxes. And the second point as to why he has been able to increase his scoring and average from 2023 to 2024 is in terms of his marking prowess, which makes up 10.2 points per game on average and ranks him 7th behind other midfielders in Xavier Dersma, Akers, Dawson, Berry, Dunkley and Langdon. And the first area that presents upside is if he can improve his disposal efficiency, with Klanger seeing his scores take a negative hit to the tune of 11.7, which is right up there. So, it happens with some players that can find the ball, but just aren't really as clean as what we'd hope. So it means it kind of puts a cap on how much they can score, or a cap on their scoring ceiling as we refer to it. And the second area that does present upside is to do with more time and opportunity in the middle. So can his CBAs increase? And the short answer, I think, is yes. HORNE-FRANCIS, he was mentioned in a recent SEN interview. In fact, he was appearing on there himself. And he did mention that Hinckley was keen to have him in the engine room on a permanent basis. He made a bit of a gag saying that he doesn't think he's potentially fit enough to go into the midfield full time. But I think that, compared to last season, they're going to try and, inject him a bit more into the engine room over time. Ollie Wines has been an absolute trooper, Travis Boak, these guys that are kind of being filtered through and kind of filtered out of the team eventually when they do retire. They need the next phase coming through. And I think alongside Butters and Rosie, HORNE-FRANCIS is definitely that player that is going to be, the three-pronged attack for Port in the engine room.
The foreman will pass the verdict to the bailiff. This verdict is written on a cocktail napkin, and it still says guilty. And guilty is spelled wrong.
So let's get to the verdict now, and I'll be keen to hear Liam's verdict, but I think for me, he is a lock and load as one of the genuine 500k plus Premos in my forward line, provided that he can maintain his goal kicking as one of the main SuperCoach scoring avenues and up his disposal rate whilst lowering, in effect, his clang account as well. And if he is to do that, he can easily eclipse 105 plus. So yeah, he's a lock and load for me. One of the few lock and loads when it comes to Premos, especially in the forward line, but I just think there's too much upside there to fade him. And as I said with Liam, I'll go back over these guys. I'll maybe at the start of the next episode get his opinion of a yes, no for each player. just to get his viewpoint as well. Now let's move on to the second player, and it is Dylan Moore, 526.7k as a forward only. His 2024 average was 97.7. And Moore does unfortunately have an early bye, considering that he does play in round 0, which is, of course, something that you need to factor in. Moore, though, he took his game to new heights, finishing as the second highest averaging player whilst posting career highs with an average of 97.7 alongside 10 100-plus scores and 5 120-plus scores. Now, the big key to this increase came off the back of more goals, having kicked 36-18, which made up 18.1 points of his score on a weekly average. This eclipsed his previous career best of 27-11 in front of the sticks in 2021. The other big part of his game that helps elevate his scoring is his forward pressure game, namely his tackling prowess, where he averaged 3.96 across 25 games, which does include finals, of course. And this makes up 12.3 points of his score on average. And of the top 10 scoring forwards of 2024, he ranks third for scores via tackles behind only Alex Neil-Bullen with 16.5 and Brent Daniels with 15.5. So really big part of his game that, as I always say, when it comes to players with that in their kit bag or their arsenal, when it comes to loving a big old cuddle, that there is an ultimate cheat code for me. So really love those players. Builds that nice high floor that I speak about. So he's definitely got that in his arsenal. In terms of role, he equaled his previous best CBAs with 16%, but even in those 7 games where he was given the higher end of the scale in terms of CBAs between 24 and 45%, he only averaged 88. So it would indicate he actually scores better in his usual role, patrolling across the half-forward flank and within the forward 50-metre arc.
This verdict is written on a cocktail napkin.
So the verdict here for me is, I'm a big fan of Moore, and he should finish as one of the top 6 scoring forwards come the end of the season. But I just think in terms of value and upside, he doesn't really present too much, at least compared to, HORNE-FRANCIS when we're talking about genuine, Premos. And because there is just so many value and cheaper options in the forward line to save salary, he'll instead be someone I am targeting to bring into my team in season as a bit of an upgrade. So that is where I stand with Dylan Moore. Let's move on to the third Premo here, and it is IZAK RANKINE, priced at 521.6k as a forward only. 2024 average, 96.8. Doesn't have the extra bye. Now, RANKINE was another who posted a career high average of 96.8, which featured 5 100-plus scores and 4 120-plus scores. He finished as the third highest averaging forward. He also had an impressive rate of scoring with 0.92 points per minute on average, which, as I spoke of earlier, is the third best behind other forwards in HORNE-FRANCIS and Jackson. And much like Moore, Rankine's knack for tackling has served him well, making up 11 points on average of his weekly scores, which ranks among the top tier available for forwards in SuperCoach. But where he does most of his scoring is through his possessions to the tune of 37.4 points, which consist of loose hardball gets as well, crumbs, gathers, or handball receives. And this has him ranked number 1 for earning the most points via this avenue. And I will mention as well, these stats come via the stats guru himself in Jaden Popowski. He's been absolutely fantastic. Check him out on Twitter, Jaden Popowski, and he'll give you a bit of a rundown, breakdown, and check out his website as well, because all these stats are courtesy of him. So a good little insight to see, how players score and the breakdown with regards to that. So, this uptick in possessions, they came off the back of a more permanent switch in role to the engine room, where his CBAs lifted from just 2% in 2023 to 38% in 2024. So a big jump.
This verdict is written on a cocktail napkin.
Going on to my verdict. So I got burnt very, very badly by RANKINE last season through no fault. Well, it was partly through fault of his own, but it was more just due to bad luck. He did get suspended for 4 weeks the week that I brought him in, which is bad luck for me, and he was just an absolute idiot in shoulder charging someone. But then it got worse because it then led to him being ruled out for the remainder of the season after he returned, and then himself got concussed in his return game. So again, he is someone who I think should be able to maintain his 2024 average and presents, a little bit of upside there in terms of being able to build upon the average that he had in 2024. I do think he will finish as a top 6 forward, but again, I'll have HORNE-FRANCIS ranked slightly ahead of him in terms of out and out Premos and when we're talking about value and upside. But I do think he is a worthy starter, no doubt. So if you do have him in your team, don't fret. I think he's someone that could be a little bit of a point of difference. If you're potentially fading HORNE-FRANCIS and going for Rankin, it might work in your favor. HORNE-FRANCIS is very highly owned. So if you want to sort of go a bit of an antipod, you could go down that route. But for me, I am flipping the coin, and it has landed more on HORNE-FRANCIS, and the experience that I had with Rankin, it's given me some PTSD big time. So that's part of the reason why I'm also going for HORNE-FRANCIS over good old IZAK. Now, we must make mention that we haven't included 2024 top 10 scoring key forwards like Luke Jackson, even though he's a bit of a ruckman as well, but wasn't the best in 2024. Jesse Hogan's another player, Harry Mackay or Jeremy Cameron in our discussion, as they aren't super favourable options in a 2025 season where we, again, as I spoke about at the top of the episode, we thankfully have enough value options that should eclipse all of their averages. Now, Jackson is probably the one most relevant if Sean Darcy doesn't start the season, if he is required to step into the number one ruck position. But as we saw last season, he is very, very volatile, even when he is the number one ruck. And as I record this as well, I did see that Sean Darcy is back at training. So good sight to see there. And he is, you'd think, on track to play in their opening game. But as we know, consistent scoring and key forwards aren't two phrases that you would normally use in the same sentence. So as we've highlighted there, the fact that they were top 10 forwards is indicative of how shallow the forward options were in 2024, but it means that we don't have to rely upon them. That volatility that came with, Mackay, Jezza, Hogan, they all had big breakout games. They all had games where they kicked absolute snags and bags and had big scores off the back of it, but we now don't have to rely upon them. Now, there are other guys that we can rely upon. Well, that does round us out for part one in our broader discussion on forwards during our first round of preseason analysis episodes. We've obviously touched on a few of the main primos in this part, and we've referenced it enough throughout this episode that we are brimming, absolutely chock full with value mid-price options this season, which is what we'll be discussing in the next episode. And it's fair to say that it is definitely one episode you do not want to miss. And before we sign off, of course, don't forget to join in the discussion by leaving a comment down below if you're watching us on YouTube, or, you can send us a DM as well on our other social channels, which are via on Twitter, or if you want to call it X, at supercoach_edge, at DamoJ88, or you can find Liam at LiamEvans_95. Facebook, Insta, TikTok, you can find us just at SuperCoachEdge. And having said all that as well, make sure to join our SuperCoach Edge Open League, which the code is there on screen if you're watching us on YouTube here, but I will read it out for those tuning in via the audio podcast, and it is 623082. So make sure to get around that. I think we are trying to organize a prize as well for the top scorer, and I'll have to find out as well, the top scorer from last season still hasn't claimed his SuperCoach Edge championship ring. So I'll find out who that player is, or who that coach is, I should say, and see if they can reach out to us so we can send them their prize. But I think that will be, again, the top prize for the person that is ranked the highest in our Open League for 2025. So we're still yet to organise things, but at this stage, that will be our top prize. But jump into that Open League, as I said, it is free to do so, and the code is 623082. But before we sign off, I do want to make mention of the good crew over at SuperCoach Swordplay, formerly known as SuperCoach with DR's channel. He is teaming up with the good folk Spilsy, Janeth, and Roscoe, and they have put together and compiled, I guess, a digital season guide for 2025. I've been lucky enough to be part of it. I provided analysis, insight, everything else for Carlton, for Premos, mid-prices, and some nice little gem rookies there as well. As you can see on screen here, this is the rundown of what is in the season guide. It's got team structures, team-by-team analysis, as I spoke of, rookie analysis, junior averages, flex strategy, predicting top of each line, tips for buying low and selling high, and so on and so forth. So it is brimming with content and tips and tricks, everything else. And it also features other content creators to the ilk, and these are high brim, cream of the crop. We're talking about, we've got the Squadfather, we've got the coaches panel, SuperCoach Insider, DFS Australia, the Centre Bounds, SDS SuperCoach, Dr. SuperCoach, Footy Mailbag, Inside Fantasy Sports, Shorty, SuperCoach Hub, Jaden Popowski, and more. So be sure to check that out. As I said, bring with content. And part of the reason why I am giving this a shout out is because if you use the code SCEdge10, you'll get 10% off the price of the season guide, which is $20. So you'll get $2 off. So better than nothing. You'll get it for $18. And as I said, it's something that I have contributed to, and I can say with honesty that it is going to be a big help for rookies that have never played SuperCoach before and experienced coaches and the like. So check it out. It is an incredible resource there by the good crew at SuperCoach Swordplay. Now that is it for the first analysis episode here for season 2025. Thank you so much for tuning in. And don't forget to lob us a subscribe if you're enjoying our content, because at the end of the day, that's the best way to let us know that you are enjoying it. And if you are watching us on YouTube, obviously that speaks for itself. Hit the bell to turn notifications on so you're alerted of when fresh content does drop. And if you're listening to us via the audio podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, cup and string, whatever your method is, be sure to be a good chap or chapette and leave us a 5-star rating and potentially a review as well if you have a bit of time up your sleeve. But that is it, ladies and gents. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.